I was deeply engrossed in going through the latest test data, a tedious but necessary chore that was part of my team's month-long project on the test vehicle. Even though it was mind-numbing, I was methodically correlating and organizing the data for further analysis. In the middle of this, my phone vibrated with a text notification. I didn't bother checking who it was from initially, caught up in the monotony of my task. But as I paused for a moment, I glanced at my phone out of curiosity. To my surprise, it was from an unknown number with a local area code. I was tempted to ignore it as spam, but then I hesitated, thinking it might be a colleague's unlisted number. When I finally opened the message, my initial curiosity morphed into shock as I saw an explicit image pop up on my screen. It took me a moment to register what I was seeing, a close-up of a woman's intimate parts with evidence of recent ejaculation. Attached to the image was a cryptic text. "Look closely, you still have time. Bradley's 6. At first, I shrugged it off as a misguided attempt at solicitation, almost finding humor in the bizarre situation. But as I examined the image more closely, I noticed something that made my blood run cold, a small mole that I recognized as being on my wife Lisa's body. A flood of doubt and disbelief hit me as I tried to convince myself it wasn't true, but the evidence was undeniable. Questions flooded my mind, especially about Lisa's supposed location. She was supposed to be on her way to Boston for an important work event. Yet here I was, staring at an image that suggested otherwise. The message arrived just before 5:15 p.m., conflicting with Lisa's scheduled landing in Boston at 4:30 p.m. Normally, she'd check in with me upon arrival, but I rationalized that maybe she was caught up with her team's activities. Amid the whirlwind of emotions, I decided to respond to the text first before taking any further steps. Not the most original move, but somewhat expected. I texted back, "Who is this? How did you get this picture? Am I supposed to meet you at Bradley's?" As I prepared to leave for the day, I resolved to go to Bradley's to find out what was going on. I sent a message to Lisa. "How was your flight? I'm grabbing a bite. Call me when you get a chance." I wanted to keep it casual and gather information without raising any suspicions. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed again. Thinking it was Lisa, I checked, only to find a reply from the mysterious sender. "I'll be there, but you'll probably find someone more intriguing than me." Overwhelmed, I got into my car and checked the map on my phone. Bradley's was about 30 minutes away, and it was already 5:40 p.m. I arrived just after 6 p.m., unsure how important the timing was, but hopeful I wasn't too late to meet whoever the texter intended for me to find. During the drive, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Lisa. "Crazy busy with the team. We'll call you later before bed. Love you." I pushed thoughts of that conversation aside, concentrating on the mystery at Bradley's and what the texter knew about my wife. Parking at 6:12, my heart pounded in my chest. The texter hadn't provided any hints about who I should look for, so I assumed they would recognize me and make the first move. Yet, the message about someone more interesting being there gnawed at me. The texter seemed to have information I didn't, and I feared walking into an unknown trap with no other way to uncover the truth. The image of my wife's intimate parts was seared into my mind, leaving me in turmoil. I had always trusted her completely, believing our relationship was strong and fulfilling, or so I thought. But the fact that someone had such a personal image was deeply unsettling, and I was just moments away from uncovering the truth, a realization that filled me with dread. Entering the pub, I let my eyes adjust to the dim lighting. Unfamiliar with the layout, I paused near the entrance to get my bearings. A large dining area spread out before me, with a bar to the left. Choosing a seat at the end of the bar, I ordered a draft and scanned the room. My gaze settled on a man who had just gotten his drink and was making his way over to a table of cheerful folks. And there, seated at the table, receiving a drink from the sharply dressed man, was Lisa, looking stunning in her little black dress and pearls, her smile lighting up the room. I moved toward the table like a man in a trance. Just a few steps away, Lisa's expression changed from warm happiness to wide-eyed terror as she noticed me. Undeterred, I reached the table and grabbed a handful of the well-dressed man's hair with my left hand, pulling hard. He dropped his drinks and stumbled backward, yelping in pain. As I pulled him past, I let go, aiming to punch him with my right hand. But he was quicker than I expected, retreating just out of reach and falling to the floor before I could follow through. Taking a step toward him, I realized it was Dan and warned him sternly to stay down. "Dan, disheveled and drenched in his drink, nodded silently. Turning back to Lisa, I saw the whole table had gone silent. As I scanned the faces around me, I realized they were people from Lisa's team, people who had shared dinners and laughs in my home. It dawned on me that their loyalty to each other might have overshadowed their loyalty to me, except for the one person who decided to spill the beans about Lisa's betrayal. I briefly considered trying to figure out who it was, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. I told Lisa I was heading home and suggested that if she wanted to salvage our marriage, she should come with me. She agreed with a nod, but before she could stand, I asked her to wait for a moment. I turned to Kathy Johnson and Mike Edwards, who were sitting nearby, and asked if their spouses thought they were in Boston. Their guilty reactions spoke volumes. I started wondering if the whole team was complicit in this deception, knowing that at least some of them were. The drive home was a blur, ending with me pulling into the driveway without any memory of the journey. Once inside, I grabbed a beer and settled in the living room, reflecting on the familiar faces. I knew Greg Johnson and Sarah Edwards well, but the other couples at the table were strangers. I considered calling Mike or Sarah to dig deeper, but I decided against it. Instead, I sent them a quick message. Just heard Lisa's travel plans changed. Might want to check in. That left them to decide how to handle it, while I tried to find a sliver of closure in the chaos. About 20 minutes later, I heard the garage door open and Lisa's car pull in. I stayed put in the living room. She walked in, still in her little black dress, but without the flashy shoes and jewelry. She sat across from me on the sofa, calm as could be. I decided to let silence do the talking, knowing its power in moments like this. It didn't take long for Lisa to break it. "It's not what you think," she started, but I stopped her with a hand. "You have no idea what I'm thinking about tonight," I replied. "I don't need a play-by-play. We both know the answer to why is just a way to rationalize bad choices, so I'm not going to ask. Let's keep it simple. How long, how many times, how often? Do our friends know, or just the ones who cheat at the table? Am I the fool in your circle, your betrayed husband?" "Jake, it's not like that," Lisa protested. "Our travel plans got messed up, and instead of coming home to leave again tomorrow, Dan suggested we stay in town for a day off." "I didn't see the whole team there. Where was everyone else?" I asked. "When we got the news, some decided to stay home one more night and meet us at the airport tomorrow," she admitted. "But you chose to lie to me," I pointed out. "You seemed close to Dan. Anything happening between the superstar engineer and the up-and-coming program manager you'd like to share?" "Dan's a good guy, and he convinced the owners at Bradley's not to press charges," she said, trying to defend him. I couldn't believe her misplaced loyalty. "I couldn't care less about your colleague. If he hadn't stumbled, I would have hit him. Whether they press charges or not doesn't matter to me. I've spent a night in jail before. It's no big deal. It might even make for an interesting court story," I added with a wry smile. "Do you love him?" Lisa paused, clearly grappling with her response. Silence was a powerful ally, allowing my mind to race to fill the void. This conversation wasn't headed for a happy ending. "He's not my boyfriend. There's nothing between us. Yes, I should have told you about the change in plans, but it seemed unimportant. Whether I was here or in Boston, you weren't expecting me, and I was still focused on the team. We were just having dinner before heading to our rooms. You had no reason to act like you did. You embarrassed me in front of my team," she claimed, trying to bluff her way through it. I pulled out my phone, opened the message with the picture, and slid it across the coffee table to her. Her face told me she recognized the image, leaving no room for denial. This time she spoke without pretense. I started a voice recording app on my phone and tucked it into my shirt pocket. "Jake, our team is," she hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Very close-knit. Most of us," she began. "We have a small group that meets regularly. They were all at Bradley's. We're the ones who put in the extra work for the proposal. You know how much time I've spent on our pitch." I don't remember exactly when it started. After Dan became PM, we worked closely, and I found myself drawn to him, and it just happened, Lisa explained. "I don't need excuses," I interrupted. "Ending up in bed doesn't just happen. We make choices. Let's not pretend otherwise." "So, almost 6 months," I said, answering my own question. "That's when Dan joined, right?" She nodded. "The team," I continued. "All of you." I left the question hanging. "Together?" She nodded again. "Dan said it builds trust and unity." So, is that what got you all to start this office affair club? I asked, sarcasm heavy in my voice. Now you're just being crude, Lisa shot back, her confidence unshaken. It's deeper than that. I have a strong connection to Dan and my team, more than ever before, she said with conviction. I sensed this was heading in a bad direction. You might see some changes in your team soon, I warned. What did you do? Lisa gasped. Jake, getting others involved will just make things worse. Let them handle their choices. We need to focus on us. Lisa, I can't just sit back and be complicit. I care about Mike and Sarah. Honestly, I like them a lot more than Kathy and Greg right now, I replied. I've already texted them about the change in plans. How they deal with it is their call. I can live with my decision. Jake, we have the most productive team in Chromerica Inc.'s history, she practically yelled. You've benefited too. Just because our team meetings were on Wednesdays didn't mean you missed out. I never kept you from me when you wanted, so I slept with my team a bit early. You never noticed. You want to know about that picture? She sneered. That was right after Dan finished inside me. Yes, he did it to your loving wife. And you know who took that picture? Kathy, just before she got involved herself. So you never had seconds or tasted another man's seed. If you don't know, it didn't happen, right? I listened in shock, the full extent of her betrayal and my own ignorance crashing over me. And now, just because you know, just because your ego is hurt, you want to destroy everything my team and I have built? Lisa hissed, her anger boiling over. My heart pounded in my chest as she defended her team's twisted dynamics. My own anger rose with every word she spoke. On the drive home from Bradley's, I briefly thought I might forgive Dan this once. That notion died a quick death. I didn't need to hear more, and I definitely didn't want to, but Lisa wouldn't stop. No, sir, we won't let you off that easily. You're going to text Mike and Sarah back, telling them you heard from me and that we were stuck in Atlanta, but have plans to leave in the morning. That's the story Kathy and Greg will stick to. And you're going to support them, damn it, she shouted. There are millions riding on this deal, and your hurt feelings don't mean a thing. Send the text, and then we can discuss what comes next. Discuss what? I retorted. There's nothing to discuss. You're leaving. Now. You and your sleazy team, including Dan, can continue however you like. We're done. I'll be calling a lawyer this week to start the divorce. It's a simple 50-50 split. You keep your retirement and I'll keep mine, I declared. But go. You have reservations in town. Use them. Head off to Boston and chalk up another victory for you and your team. Jake, please send those texts, Lisa pleaded, her tone suddenly softer. If we lose Kathy or Greg before the presentation, the company could lose millions. We could miss out on tens, maybe hundreds of thousands in bonuses and commissions. Think about all the places we could go with that money. Just you and me. Forget this mess and get my loyalty back. Please, Jake, don't let some irrational hang-up over meaningless encounters ruin us. Dan says I'm on the fast track to executive status. I just need to keep delivering results for a few more years. Don't you want that for me? For us? She implored. Lisa, just leave, I managed to say before something hard slammed into my back, knocking the wind out of me as I hit the floor, pinned down with a knee pressing into my back. Don't hurt him, Lisa said quickly, then added, too much. Still undecided about breaking my nose? Dan taunted, leaning close to my face as I lay on the floor. Lisa must have a bug, I thought. Now I know whose side she's really on. We'll see whose nose gets broken, Dan smirked. Get his damn phone and send those texts. We don't have time for this nonsense. Someone grabbed me and pulled me up from the floor. I faked being hurt, making the person behind me work hard to get me on my feet. This gave me valuable information. My captor was just a weak office worker, wheezing from the effort of lifting me. Catching my breath, I refocused on the situation. Unlike Dan and his polished sales team, I worked in the field with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, SOAR, out of Fort Campbell, Kentucky. While my team of engineers didn't match their skill level, spending time with the crews during test missions meant we got invited to train under the guidance of seasoned veterans who flew missions in aircraft modified by my team. If these men showed up at your door, it meant the end of the line. My team and I designed the gear to get in and, more importantly, out of dangerous places. We took pride in our modifications, knowing they contributed to successful missions and brought everyone home safely. The 160th and their elite passengers greatly valued the hard work of my team, but no one commanded more respect then Master Sergeant Rob Harris. He was a legend in his community, with everyone from new recruits to senior officers acknowledging the guidance and leadership he provided on missions around the world. MSGT Harris was famous for never leaving anyone behind, a reputation that was cemented during a mission in Colombia. On that mission, he told a young lieutenant to stick close. When the FARC ambushed their unit, MSGT Harris initially thought the LT was doing well for a rookie, until he saw him down with a head wound. The medic checked him and reported that the LT was gone, but Harris lifted him up in a fireman's carry. Despite the medic's protest, Harris replied, "He might be gone, but he's coming back with us." The medic thought he was crazy. Carrying a dead man over 5 kilometers through dense forest was a huge risk. But Harris said, "I'd do the same for you, Greggy. Stick close in case I need you." What followed became legendary. When they returned to base, the medic informed the doctor that the LT had died. The doctor just nodded and shined a penlight into the LT's eyes. To the medic's shock, the pupils reacted to the light, and they rushed the LT into surgery. Harris didn't say much, but when he did, everyone listened. He was like a relic from another time, a man who valued craftsmanship over convenience, and he seemed to have a special place in his heart for my team. During the long stretches between missions, MSGT Harris showed his appreciation by teaching us some basic but effective hand-to-hand techniques. "It's better to know something just in case," he'd say. "I know the biggest threat you might face is a paper jam or a nasty paper cut, but if you stick around this line of work, you might find yourself in some interesting places. This way, if you ever meet a colorful local, you'll have something to fall back on. But let's hope a paper cut is the worst you'll have to deal with." I focused on keeping my breathing calm and acted subdued in my captor's grip, recalling the moves MSGT Harris taught us. "Sometimes you'll feel like you can't do anything but take the hits," he said. "It's unfortunate, but it happens. The key is to remember that even when you're getting pounded, you can still fight back. You just have to outsmart your attacker." I remembered that lesson and subtly resisted, gradually wearing down the guy's strength. "Give me the phone, Jake," Dan demanded, glaring at me. "Now you know I've been with your wife and that every guy on the team has had their fun with her. Drop the tough guy act, Jake. You're just a weak, nerdy pushover. Do as we say, and maybe you'll get your wife back when we're done with her. Don't forget all the luxuries her bonus can buy. That should take away the sting. Who knows, maybe Lisa will even get you a robot for those times she's busy." I held my tongue as Dan enjoyed humiliating me, trying to force me to comply. He saw the outline of the phone in my shirt pocket and reached for it with his right hand. I suddenly stepped back with my right heel, driving it into my captor's shin. He cried out in pain and stumbled. Taking advantage, I broke free from his grip, leaving him yelping on the floor. Dan's eyes widened as he saw what happened. With my right arm extended, I rolled my shoulder as MSGT Harris taught, driving my fist into Dan's face with everything I had. I felt the crunch of bones breaking under my knuckles as blood streamed from his nose, and he crashed to the floor. I turned to see who had grabbed me. It was Greg, crying and clutching his leg, saying he thought his foot was broken. I stomped on his foot, making him scream in agony. "That should clear up any confusion," I said. Turning back to Dan, I saw him on the floor, trying to get to his knees with his hands over his face. I leaned in and said, "Looks like your nose took the hit. I'm not taking one for the team." Then I punched him in the temple, knocking him out cold. With adrenaline surging through me and my breath coming in ragged gasps, I scanned the room for Lisa. Suddenly, a sharp blow hit my back and neck. I dropped to one knee, spinning to face my new attacker. There stood Lisa, holding a cast-iron skillet. The skillet swung past me, barely grazing my side. Getting back on my feet, I yanked the pan from Lisa's grip. She begged me to consider fixing things between us, urging me to think about the money we'd be leaving on the table. She promised she would end the affairs, assuring me we could return to how things used to be. As I rubbed the back of my head, astonished at how quickly she changed her tune, I couldn't help but compare her to the shape-shifting alien from John Carpenter's The Thing, always adapting to whatever challenge arose. I smirked at the thought. Seeing my smile, Lisa misread it as agreement and moved to hug me. I stopped her with my left hand. Then, after a brief hesitation, I struck her nose with my right hand. The sound of bone cracking echoed, and though it didn't knock her out, she cried out in pain and crumpled to the floor. I remarked that it hurt like hell, with tears streaming, vision blurred, and breath labored, adding, but it works every time. Why did you hit me? Lisa asked, wincing in pain. Unapologetic, I told her I did it because I could. I kept recording the whole scene, feeling confident I had enough evidence to justify my actions, even if it painted me in a bad light. Reflecting on MSGT's advice about decisive action, I looked around the room. Greg was still whimpering, and Lisa was trying to stop her nose from bleeding. While everyone else was motionless, I felt a small victory, giving credit to MSGT. Considering the aftermath, I expressed frustration about what would happen to Dan and Greg, regretting the lost opportunities and potential financial hits. I thought about calling the police, but decided to hold off, wanting a chance to question Lisa. Kneeling beside her, I showed her how to stop the nosebleed, but as my adrenaline faded, I felt my energy drain, leaving me to sit across from the woman I thought I knew. I questioned her actions, wondering how far Lisa's deception really went. I asked about her ambitions, especially her aim to become a VP. Lisa admitted it would have been worthwhile if I had just gone along with her plan, lamenting the setback caused by the incident. I pressed on, asking about the future of our relationship and if the lies would continue. Lisa admitted there was a chance the deceit would persist. I learned from Lisa that Dan had warned her about my strong ethics and idealistic views, advising her to break free from my influence if she wanted to succeed. When I asked when Dan had told her this, she snapped back, implying I knew little about her relationship with him. Despite my silence, Lisa went on, sharing her thoughts on career advancement. She explained that following my advice had only earned her a few commendations, and it wasn't until Kathy showed her the ropes that she learned what really worked for women in the workplace. Lisa claimed that using sex for career advancement was not only effective, but also enjoyable. As I recorded everything, I processed what she said. I asked if her activities started before Dan came into the picture. Impatient, Lisa revealed she began this approach at the company's Christmas party a year after she joined Cromerica, sticking to it ever since. Wait, are you sleeping with the boss too? Frank Reynolds? I asked incredulously. Yes, Jake, Frank, Dan, Greg, anyone on the team who could help my career. It costs me nothing to be close with them. It's easy to lead you men by your desires, especially you. Show a bit of cleavage and I could steer you wherever I needed, she said. Even now, thinking you have it all figured out. We told Frank where we were going. Right now, he's gathering the rest of the team and crafting a cover story for our absence. They'll have to make the pitch without us, but the extra effort with their purchasing managers should pay off. Do I really want to hear this? I wondered. Oh, what the heck, why not? I said. Extra effort, huh? You always were a go-getter, Lisa. It was so easy, I hate to even call it effort, she laughed. What's the old joke? The worst sex I ever had was still great? At the Bitters conference, it was simple with the men. We had to get creative with Karen, the token woman on the selection board. It's funny, I can seduce a woman too, but I threw in Dan as the cherry on top. She was curious, and her curiosity peaked when my tongue did its work. Promises of more to come after we started working together sealed the deal. Yeah, we've got the selection board covered. Why all this then? If everything's already set up, why the strong-arm tactics? I asked. That was Dan's brilliant idea, Lisa replied, rolling her eyes. I told him to back off. I planned to come home, make you happy, and be back in time for the flight. But he insisted on going all alpha, and now look where we are. Instead of being the face of a winning team, I'm stuck dealing with Frank. Like I said, it's fixable, but it'll set me back. You wouldn't have bought me so cheap, I said. Maybe not, Lisa replied, but I still would have made the flight. Well, you sure as hell aren't making that flight now, I declared. Remembering how Dan seemed so informed, I suspected Lisa had a transmitter on her. Frank, are you listening? I'm about to call the cops. I'm sure there are a few felonies here, and we haven't even started down the fraud rabbit hole. That's a federal contract, isn't it, Lisa? I asked rhetorically. Yeah, the feds don't look kindly on extra effort. I'm sure you've got great lawyers, Frank, but maybe there's an alternative. I let the question hang. A moment later, Lisa's phone played. Hail to the chief. Frank? She asked into the phone. Of course, I'll put you on speaker. Jake? Frank's voice came through. First, let me apologize. Dan's actions were a gross lapse in judgment. I assure you, the board will deal with him firmly. Thank you, Frank. I'm glad the board takes assault and fraud seriously. Jake, these are unfortunate allegations. Lawyers will profit, but nobody wants to rock the boat. We might pay a fine. Dan and Greg get community service. But ultimately, you'll be divorced and half as wealthy, Frank explained, in a businesslike manner. Is there an or in this story, Frank? I asked. Lisa always said you were the clever one. Still, I'm glad we hired Lisa. Yes, Jake, there is most definitely an or, Frank continued. Jake, we at Cromerica have displaced you in your wife's affections. When you found out and questioned it, you were treated poorly. Most shabby? Shocking, I chimed in. Jake, Frank continued, instead of calling the cops, suppose we could come to an agreement. I just sent a snap to Lisa's phone, not from me, one of my tech guys. They tell me it disappears after viewing. Have a look. Perhaps it might restore some goodwill. Lisa opened the snap and turned the phone to me. I saw the words Bank of Grand Cayman and a number, a very large number. And when would that be deposited? I asked. It's already there, Jake. You have an email with the account number. This has been a bad day for you, Jake. This may be a hard decision, and I understand the emotion involved. Lisa is a very desirable woman. But you can't take emotion to the bank, can you? One can't, I agreed, mimicking Frank's clipped upper-crust manner. Cromerica will cover your divorce costs. You can't reconcile. Lisa will file. She'll ask for her personal belongings and her retirement. I thought for a moment. I could stand on principle, expose the whole mess, and let the chips fall. Or I could walk away. Frank had given me 5 million reasons to do just that. Does Cromerica have a medical staff, Frank? I asked. Yes, Jake. We have some physicians on retainer, Frank replied. Good, I said. You'd better load a few into a limo and send them over here to pick up your team. Are we in agreement? Lisa who? I replied. Precisely, Frank agreed. Are we done, Jake? Goodbye, Frank, I said, and ended the call. I put my phone away, turned off the recording app, and slipped it back into my pocket. I knew you'd see it our way, Jake. We can still be friends, with benefits when this is all over. Lisa tried her most winning smile, but even her radiant smile couldn't hide her ruined nose. Her eyes were blackening, and blood was crusted under her nose, with dried drips down her chin. I found the sight comical and allowed myself a smile. Once again, Lisa misread my smile as agreement and leaned in to kiss me. I extended my right hand to stop her, gently pushing her back until she landed on the couch with a thud. I don't want to kiss you, I said, leaving Lisa hurt and looking up at me. Get your things out by tomorrow, I insisted. As I walked toward the door, I stopped beside Greg. How's the foot? I asked. Ignoring his complaints, I kicked him in the groin, making him curl up and moan. Approaching Dan, who had managed to sit up, I assured him I wouldn't hurt him. Dan's relief was short-lived as I pressed my foot into his groin, making him roll onto his side in pain. I walked out of the room, got into my car and drove off, unsure where I was going, but knowing food and shelter were priorities. I grabbed a burger from a drive-thru and checked into a Red Roof Inn just outside of town near the freeway. As soon as my head hit the pillow, I fell asleep. Despite the physical toll from various injuries, I got up early the next morning. While making motel coffee, my phone chimed. I eagerly picked it up. The text message arrived from the same mysterious number, and I opened it quickly. Apologies for yesterday. Can we meet? TGIF at the mall around noon. I'll wave you over to the bar. It'll be there, I replied, pouring the lukewarm coffee into a paper cup. Determined to sort things out, I set up my laptop and logged into my online banking. I recalled my economics professor from college, who had once advised me to set up an offshore account for emergencies. With his help, I'd opened a bank account in the Cayman Islands, which I jokingly called my go-to-hell fund. Over the years, I'd quietly built it up to nearly $50,000. I felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that fund was about to grow significantly. After accessing the secure banking websites, I transferred most of Cromerica's payment into my personal account, leaving $100,000 in the original account. After taking a shower and getting dressed, I was ready to meet the unknown texter. I arrived at TGIF a little past noon. I immediately spotted a man waving me over to the bar. He looked about my age, well-dressed and confident. I approached him. "You're the one who texted me?" I asked as I sat down. "Yeah, I'm sorry about how things turned out. I wasn't sure how else to tell you, the stranger said. Start with who you are and what your connection to Lisa is, I replied. I was on the team at Cromerica. I left the army after 8 years and was medically discharged after a long recovery. I joined Cromerica about 6 months ago and was assigned to Dan's team 3 months back. While talking to a friend about my new job, I mentioned Lisa's name. He knew you and he asked me to keep an eye out for Lisa as a favor. Initially, everything seemed great. I was welcomed to the team warmly, but it didn't take long to figure out why. About 2 months in, Lisa made a move on me. She's very attractive and persuasive, but when I asked about her wedding ring, she just laughed and said you were fine with it. I wasn't, and I told her so. That's when the cold shoulder started. After I turned her down, Dan gave me all the worst assignments and made my life difficult. I called our mutual friend to tell him what happened. He said the idea of you being okay with this was out of character for the man he knew. He figured there was more to it than Lisa let on and thought you needed to know. Dan sent me that picture to entice me into joining the team, kind of like a prize I could have. Let's just say I didn't agree with their tactics. I quit yesterday and sent you the text. Our mutual friend? I asked. Rob Harris. If it weren't for him, he said, pausing before continuing. Let's just say he saved my skin when I was a young lieutenant. I owe him a favor or two. Don't we both? I agreed. What are you going to do now? I asked. Frank made things clear. I could call the cops, and Greg, Dan, and Lisa would face legal issues. But with his lawyers, it'd be a small bump in the road. We made a deal. Maybe you think I'm selling out, and perhaps I am. But they took the one thing I can't replace. If I can't make them pay legally, at least I can make them pay financially. It won't bring Lisa back, but maybe I'll find she's not as irreplaceable as I thought. I've got a trip planned. Tell Rob thanks for everything. I'm not going back to work. What about you? Well, Rob always spoke highly of Baxter Inc. They might need another engineer now that you're gone. I think you'll find Baxter's approach more to your liking. It'll be challenging, but the perks won't be like what Lisa's team offered, I said with a smile. Accepting our decision, the stranger stood, and I followed suit. We nodded to each other and parted without further words. Fast forward to Monday, and I had just checked in for my flight to Costa Rica. Anticipating some relaxation in Tamarindo, I headed towards security. I spotted a mailbox and pulled an envelope from my pocket, addressed to the DOJ in Washington, D.C. It contained a thumb drive with a recording I thought might interest them. Considering that Frank's legal team might not be as formidable as assumed, I dropped the envelope into the box before proceeding through security. 9 months later, while sitting at my favorite cafe, Maria brought me my mail along with a cerveza. Thanks, Maria, I said, raising the bottle in a toast. Holding the envelope, I wondered who had managed to track me down. I hadn't exactly gone into hiding, but finding me in a small town on Costa Rica's Pacific coast would take some serious resources. I let the envelope sit for a couple of days to make sure it wasn't dangerous. Luis, I called to the cafe owner. ¿Tienes un cuchillo? Sí, Señor Jake. I handed him the envelope and stepped back as he carefully cut it open. I thanked him, took a swig of beer, and turned the envelope over. Several sheets of paper fell out, along with a note saying, "Thought you'd find this interesting," with a phone number. I figured Rob had the resources to find me, and I could handle that. Flipping over the next piece of paper, I found a newspaper article with a picture of Dan, Greg, Lisa, and Kathy being led out of the Cromerica building in handcuffs. The headline read, "4 indicted in multi-million-dollar procurement fraud." I chuckled. Maybe Frank's lawyers aren't as invincible as he thought, I said aloud, a habit I picked up since my Spanish was limited and English speakers were scarce. I liked hearing English, even if it was just me talking to myself.